one station making history every day.
Chicago, Chicago.
Now, John Cass and Lauren Cohn.
89 WKRS.
John Cass, Lauren Cohn, 89 WLS. Well, Lauren, a couple days ago, a weirdo who used to play basketball in Chicago, Dennis Rodman, he of the lip piercings and so on, and feather boas, went to North Korea and it was supposed... Oh, wow.
You just said, I just can't quit you, Kim Jong-un.
It was just such a lighthearted moment, bizarre and sick, because North Korea was still violating sanctions. And now, today, I guess it's not so lighthearted, is it?
No, because the UN finally put its foot down, imposing more sanctions. But, you know, what did North Korea do, which is they've done in the past, is they threaten us with a nuclear attack. The question is, do they have the capability, and how worried should we be?
Joining us now is Peter Brooks, Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, an expert in Asian affairs, formerly active on the National Security Council in the White House. Mr. Brooks, are you on?
I'm here.
What are we to make of the Korean threat to blow us up?
You know, I was kind of wondering in your lead-in there, John, whether Dennis Rodman might defriend Kim Jong-un on Facebook.
Maybe he could just pierce him with one of his facial piercings.
So I was kind of wondering about that. But no, we have to, in all seriousness, you can't dismiss the threats, but they're not uncommon. And my view is that they're probably trying to influence what's going on at the UN, which is kind of, they said this yesterday. The UN actually voted not too long ago to pass those sanctions. So it was an effort on their part to get the UN to back off by threatening. I mean, they embrace Mao Zedong's famous quote about, political power comes from the barrel of a gun, and this is how North Korea operates.
So what are the exact sanctions then on corporations and individuals?
I can't, Lauren, cite them chapter and verse, but basically they're against companies and individuals in North Korea that are involved in the weapons trade, with nuclear trade or ballistic missile trade. And it goes after them and makes their travel more difficult. It makes North Korea more difficult for North Korea if everybody plays along. That's always the problem with sanctions. Everybody has to play along.
Well, China play along, yeah.
Well, they supported this. But then once again, they might do is they might actually support it at the UN and then ignore it, right?
Who said that in politics there are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests? I would think that China's permanent interest is the Korean Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
And Lee Badong, the ambassador who was talking about this, said, quote, "This resolution is a very important step because he wants to, the long-term goal of China is to denuclearize," I love the language, denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. Yeah. So that means they get this moron to give up his nukes, and then what? We withdraw any nuclear weapons there might be in South Korea?
I think we, John,
why not just give Korea, the peninsula, to the Chinese?
Well, no, here, you're right. You got some of the facts are not quite straight in my understanding. I think we withdrew our tactical nukes after the end of the Cold War.
All right.
We don't have any nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula.
All right.
But, with China, you're right. I mean, if you look at, first thing when I talk about strategy to somebody is to pull out a map and take a look at it. I mean, China, you can't, geography is destiny. You can't change your neighborhood. You can't just pick up and move away like you can at home when you're a country. So China's stuck with the Korean Peninsula, whether they like it or not, and whatever happens on the Korean Peninsula will affect them. I mean, one of the things China's been very worried about is the collapse of the regime there, as bad as it is, because they would have huge refugee flows that would come up into China. You could also have a war on the Korean Peninsula, and that certainly wouldn't be good for what China is trying to do in that part of the world in terms of its economic growth and things along that line.
So, Peter, with your intel, do they or don't they have a warhead small enough to put on a missile?
I'm afraid to doubt them. I mean, we don't know. I mean, the problem with intelligence, and I worked in the intelligence field for a number of years, is it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. But you don't get to look at the box first, the cover, the picture on the cover sometimes. And sometimes some pieces are missing, and sometimes you have pieces from other puzzles. And you have to make judgments based on that. I think there's a sense now that they may have exploded something more advanced this time, and that's why you would have another test, because you're trying to test something. And what you want to be able to do is to shrink it down to such a size that you can put it on the top of a missile and launch it at an enemy, such as the United States. You can't. The first experiment they did is probably this large area, very heavy, a lot of unaerodynamic sort of equipment. So what you have to do is you have to what they call weaponizing it. So you have to take it from the experimental stage and weaponize it, putting it into a warhead that can withstand the great pressures and temperatures of intercontinental flight, and then go bang at the end. And so the North Koreans keep talking about this. And so I think, intelligence is looking at this, seeing what they can figure out. We may not have the answer yet, but you kind of have to take them at their word. And that's why it's so critically important. Things like missile defense is so critically important, so we can defend ourselves in case they do something stupid and launch something.
Now, they want something from us and from China, right? They want help.
Yeah,
economically. That's why they're threatening. But let's say, God forbid, that they did get a missile across and it did hit the United States.
Right.
Our initial response, I would assume, would be to flatten them, right, with our own strikes. But then what would China do?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? They supposedly have, John. They supposedly have a treaty. Going back to the Korean War with North Korea, a military treaty, a military alliance. They don't talk much about it, but it's supposedly still in force. And that's the whole thing about what happens if North Korea collapses. And South Korea goes above the DMZ to stabilize things or whatever, and U.S. forces might be with them. What would China do? Would we end up in the same situation we had in 1950? Remember that?
Well, what do you think they would do?
I don't know. I really don't know. But I think they would. It could. What I really worry about is they would. I know they would protect their interests. They're not crazy about the idea of having a unified Korea that might be an ally of the United States on their, attached to them at the hip. And what I really worry about is, even though in today's day of communications and other things, is miscalculation and misperceptions between the two sides that could lead to something bigger. And that's what I'm talking about is a conflict between the U.S. and China. I think that the Korean Peninsula is a place where the U.S. and China could come to war, besides a place like Taiwan. And, of course, I'm increasingly worried about East China Sea and the South China Sea.
So let's say they violate the sanctions. What's our next step?
Well, what you can only try to do is, look, North Korea is a tough one, okay? It's a tough nut to crack. It's, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it's very difficult. These guys have had a foreign policy of brinksmanship and blackmail for so many years now that this is how they operate. Unfortunately, they've been successful, so they keep doing it. What you can try to do with sanctions is you're always trying to get sanctions to be, more effective, more countries involved in it. There's a WikiLeaks cable out there that I haven't seen myself, so people may want to check this out there. But it said that 19 times the United States approached China about North Korean proliferation activities to Iran. And 19 times, basically, the Chinese ignored it.
Okay, listen, we can't ignore the clock, which is our friend. Peter, thank you so much for
time. No one.
Thank you so much for being
Thanks,
on
Peter.
with us. 89 WLS, first on the fives, traffic and weather with Ryan Burke. John Cass, Lauren Cohn. We just spoke to Peter Brooks about China and Korea.
Yeah, very scary.
Particularly his analysis that he was more worried about the United States and China coming into conflict over Korean Peninsula rather than Taiwan. Then that's usually our first look, right?
Right.
And I'm looking at a story that just came out. It came out a couple of days ago in the New York Times. Let me read this to you. An Iranian dhow seized off the Yemeni coast was carrying sophisticated Chinese anti-aircraft missiles, a development that could signal an escalation of Iran's support to its Middle Eastern proxies, alarming other countries in the region and renewing a diplomatic challenge to the United States.
Yeah, and Peter Brooks brought that up a couple weeks ago when we talked to him when this first threat originally came out about how North Korea could turn to Iran. Forget China.
And China is apparently helping Iran, providing missiles and so on, anti-aircraft missiles to Iran.
Yeah, and
then Iran's sending them out to other allies. So, the world, it's not, things are very complicated and layered, right? But I think we have to have our own principles clear. We don't kill our citizens. The president doesn't kill our citizens without cause. At the same time, we have these issues, right?
Right. We have threats that we have to take care of. And it's interesting because Peter Brooks was saying, even someone like him who has, been in the intelligence business for a long time, even his intel can't tell us necessarily just how capable they are of a strike against us. That's scary.
I mean, they want North Korea, that ridiculous little puppet dictator. I don't know. Does he look like he has the brains to actually...
Kim Jong-un?
Does he look like he has the brains to run a country? It's probably some generals behind him.
This is the same guy that was hanging with Dennis Rodman, right?
Who paid for that trip? The Korean government? China? I never understood that. Who paid for that? The Dennis Rodman trip. And while he's out there, see, that's the difference between celebrity, right? We have the celebrity news. Dennis Rodman, cool, gum gun guy or whatever, right? Remember that whole deal? Hey, I'm with the gum guy. No, that guy's in South Korea. Right? And then we have that. That is the Twitter celebrity news nonsense. Meanwhile, they're threatening a nuclear attack.
Right.
And in Illinois, in Washington, we have, Michelle Obama's arms and so on. And at the same time, we have Rand Paul doing a filibuster.
Standing out there for 13 hours trying to make a point about the danger of using drones against American citizens on U.S. soil. Yeah. I'm
just 591-8900. We just want to talk foreign policy and domestic policy here just for a little bit, because it bothers me that we are not vigilant enough about our own freedom. And I'm not talking about partisanship, but our freedom as Americans. John in Mundelein, you got 30 seconds.
How are you today?
Hey, buddy, 30 seconds.
Okay, well, I got to say, you just suggested that the president wants to kill American citizens without cause. I find that an offensive suggestion, but I also find it hilariously and somewhat nauseatingly hypocritical for the same people in right-wing talk radio and their sycophantic callers like Sean from Elmwood Park, who are the same
defenders of
warrantless wiretapping and extrajudicial detention and renditions and waterboarding and treating American citizens like enemy combatants like John Walker Lind and Mr. Padilla.
Right.
But now, all of a sudden, you're up in arms about the judicial process being allowed to take its place.
Where are you? Do you think the president should be allowed to kill Americans with drones without, hold on, John. Hold on, because I want to hear your left-wing nonsense. Would you hold on? All right, John Cass, Lauren Cohn, back after this.
I'm so lonely, so lonely. 89 WLS.
Whether it happens in Chicago or around the globe, be the first to know about it. Text BREAKING to 68683 and get breaking news alerts. 89 WLS.
The political left did nothing that, was upset about waterboarding, but I guess they don't care about drone strikes being used to kill American citizens without trial. John from Mundelein, David Axelrod's side. What do you have to say, John?
Well, I appreciate you giving me a little more time. I'll make a statement and ask a question.
You just got very quick. Now you got 20 seconds.
My statement is this.
Ask me a question.
I'm sorry?
Ask a question. We got it because we're on almost.
Okay, my question is this. Is it not true that if there were an American citizen who trained as a terrorist in another country, who then came here and blew up a building and killed a lot of people, and we then found out that the administration could have targeted him with a drone strike, are you prepared to tell me that you and Limbaugh and Mark Levin and good old Sean from Elmwood Park would not be among the first to be outraged and say, why didn't Obama take the guy out when he had the chance?
John, comparing me to Limbaugh is wrong, because it's like comparing you to North Korea, that North Korean moron. Okay? Listen. Sir? Yeah, the question is this. Here's my answer. Do not, you can arrest somebody, but you don't kill American citizens without trial with robots. And that applies to a Democratic president or a Republican. You never know who you're going to get. And the idea is the Constitution protects us. Don't. Anyway, thanks for your call. John Cass, Lauren Cohn. When we come back, the laughing guy.
89 WLS.
Ravinia just announced their 2013 season with more than 120 events running June 6th through September 15th, including Sting, Sheryl Crow, Chicago, Matchbox 20, Jackson Brown, Tony Bennett, Melissa Etheridge, and more. Tickets go on sale to the public on April 25th. For more information, go to WLSAM.com.
Lauren?
Getting ready for Chicago Fire in Ravinia. All good stuff. I love it.
And I'm not going to be here tomorrow.
I know.